Hello everyone. Welcome to this CGS webinar sponsored by Liaison, Centralized, Decentralized, or Blended, Choosing Your Best Fit Admissions Model. My name is Maureen McCarthy. I'm the Director of Best Practices and Advancement here at the Council of Graduate Schools, and I'll just be making some housekeeping announcements before we get started. So today we have some presentations and a moderated discussion, and then a chance for you all to ask questions and to make comments. The webinar recording and slides will be emailed to everyone who registered, and it will also be posted and archived on the CGS website. So don't worry about furiously taking notes. We will be providing the slides and recording to you. At any time, if you have a question or a comment, you can submit those through your GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can see in the picture there the appropriate section of the panel. And you can just type in your questions. And that will be the way we will conduct the Q&A at the end, is by coordinating typed questions. If you have technical issues, please contact GoToWebinar for support. And finally, we may experience a brief disruption around 2:18 or 2:20. There's a nationwide test of the wireless emergency alert system. We're not quite sure exactly how this will impact the webinar, but in the event that it causes a disruption, we anticipate we'll just pause for the amount of time when if there is a noise, we'll just pause for the duration and then continue the webinar as scheduled. So if you're on but having trouble hearing, please switch your connection to either mic or speakers or telephone as appropriate. You can switch at any time during the webinar without losing your connection. And this slide provides some additional instructions for if you're having issues with that. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce the president of the Council of Graduate Schools, Suzanne Ortega, who's going to make some brief introductory remarks.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Good afternoon. We're so glad that you all have joined us, and I guess having said good afternoon, I should say good morning to our colleagues on the West Coast. Welcome, everyone. We've had a lot of interest in this webinar, which I think speaks to the importance of optimizing graduate admissions practices for each campus's needs. At CGS, we don't endorse any particular way of structuring admissions processes, but we are committed to providing our members with information about the full range of options that exist. More than anything, perhaps we're interested in hearing from you about what works, and I hope that everyone on the webinar today feels invited to share their own experiences and offer examples of promising practices from your universities. I wanted to share with this group briefly that the Council recently completed a study of master's admissions processes. During this study, we asked graduate deans and graduate programs about different applicant qualities and attributes that were valued in master's admissions processes, and how those are linked to measures of student success. Among the findings, the key findings, I would say, is that 1, the potential for completing the degree is the most important milestones that master's programs look for in their applicants during master's admissions. 2nd, critical thinking and analytical thinking are the most important attributes and qualities that master's programs associate with an applicant's potential to meet key milestones in master's education. 3rd, letters of recommendations are used to evaluate a wide range of applicant attributes and qualities, yet by and large, there are few rubrics or training materials provided to admissions committees to assess these letters, especially for non-cognitive attributes. And finally, there is little institutional level training and few resources that are provided to faculty members or committees to prepare for participation in the master's admissions process. Look for the report from this project, which will be released later this fall. Well, bottom line is we're really excited to continue the conversation about admissions here today and are really grateful and want to thank Liaison for their programmatic and financial support of the webinar and for their participation in the CGS Sustaining Membership Network, which allows companies to demonstrate their commitment to advancing graduate education. At this time, I'd like to introduce Karen Jacobs, Vice President for Account Management at Liaison International, who will serve as our webinar moderator today. Karen has been with Liaison for 4 years after over 10 years at Thomas Jefferson University, leading the undergraduate and graduate admissions operation for the Jefferson Schools of Health Professions, Nursing, Pharmacy, and Population Health. Prior to that, she managed admissions, financial aid and enrollment management programs at Penn State Abington and Jacksonville University. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Suzanne, and welcome everyone to our webinar today. Very happy to be here. As Suzanne said, I have a background in higher education in addition to my current work at Liaison, and I'm very happy and privileged to be part of this webinar today. What I want to start off with is making sure that we've got some very clear objectives for the webinar today, and I'd like to outline what those learning objectives will be. Our expectation is that at the end of this webinar, that those of you who are attending will be able to recognize the benefits of a centralized, decentralized, and blended admissions models. That you'll be able to leverage the lessons that you've learned today by admissions colleagues to determine which admissions model will work best for specific goals. And finally, that you'll be able to strategize how to develop your own best fit admissions model. I think it's also important in order to go through these learning objectives and in order to go through our webinar that we have a definition of exactly what we're talking about when we speak about centralized, decentralized, or blended models. And for the purposes of the webinar today, we're going to use the following: that a centralized model is one that is basically undergraduate inspired, that revolves around the central governing body that sets policies and the baseline standards that are used. In a decentralized model, what you see are the individual colleges and departments who work independently, taking charge of their own processes and decisions. And then a blended or hybrid model would be some combination of both of those. So now that we have our learning objectives, we've defined what we mean by centralized, decentralized, or blended, we'd like to hear from you and see what each of your processes are. So we're going to have a quick poll. You'll be able to see the poll on your screen, and you can just choose which model most closely represents the current admissions model on your campus. So go ahead and vote now. And as soon as we've got some results here, we should be able to see these results on screen. And there. Centralized 20%, decentralized 23%, blended 56%, which I think if you were guessing or betting beforehand is probably how you imagine this would turn out. So this should make for an interesting discussion as we go forward. So I have the privilege today of working with a panel, a very esteemed panel, and actually I know all of our panelists quite well. I've had the privilege of working with each of them as they've gone through the implementations of their centralized application services. And so I'd like to take a few minutes to let each of the panel members introduce themselves. And then after that, we'll go into a discussion where we're going to get some really great insight and feedback from each of our panelists. Julie, would you like to start?
Well, hello everyone, and greetings from Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri. I serve as Associate Provost and Dean of the Graduate School. And Karen, I am going to also talk about how many central application services we have on our campus. We've been using CAS services for over a decade. OT-CAS, PT-CAS, CASPA, and CIDCAS were among our first. I was on the advisory board for CIDCAS for 10 years. In fact, I was president of the National Association that signed the agreement with Liaison to start CIDCAS. So we have a rich history at MSU of using CAS systems. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Missouri State University's blended model. In our case, our departments set their own admission criteria. However, the graduate college, and in our case, the graduate council, establishes minimum admission requirements. So the way that we oversee this is that anytime a new program begins, they must specify their admission requirements. The graduate council oversees and ensures compliance with our central requirements, and then we ensure on a daily basis that those are adhered to in individual admission decisions. The department reviews applicants based on their criteria and recommends to us admission. We run a report to indeed confirm that, and then we are the ones that say, based on the department's recommendation, we offer admission. And of course, if the department says deny, we deny. That's Missouri State.
Thank you, Julie. And now I'd like to have Robbie Melton. Dr. Melton, would you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your admissions model?
Hello, everyone. I'm Robbie Melton from Tennessee State University, Nashville, Tennessee. Again, I joined the team only 6 months ago. Formerly, I was the Associate Vice Chancellor for the Tennessee Board of Regents, overseeing 47 campuses. Coming to Tennessee State, my goal was to assist in reorganizing the graduate school and to seek out a solution for our online graduate application. Next slide, please. Being a newbie to this entire process, I bring to you a perspective of starting from ground zero. Currently, we have 8 of the CASs, and as you see, from social work, engineering, business, nursing, psych, OT, PT, and speech and language, and our largest one, grad CAS. I am bringing you a perspective of how do you start, where do you go, your research, and your resources in terms of using grad CAS as part of our strategic planning process. Next slide, please. So with that, we have tried a couple of models just within the 6 months. We already had 5 of the CASs up and running, and basically they were independent. However, we saw the benefits, the features, and the transparency of the application process of those CAS and decided as a university to come together and present a full strategic model for all of the CASs and adding on the other 5. With that, we now have a blended model. Our CAS basically decide on the admission, and the graduate school serves as a quality review where we can basically set standards for all of our CAS and help to monitor and track applicants. But the main goal that I bring to you all as a newbie is the ability for all stakeholders to know exactly where the applicants are in the admission process. So again, with a small staff of 4 analysts and 2 what we call executive directors, we are overseeing, again, all of the CASs for the entire university. So again, welcome, and you will learn so much from those who have been within CAS and newbies like Tennessee State. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. And Olivia.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. I'm Olivia Nash, and I'm the Assistant Dean of the Graduate School at University of the Pacific. A little bit about University of the Pacific. We are a small private institution located in Northern California. We have a total enrollment of about 6,400, and of those, about 1,150 of those are graduate level students. We have 3 campuses, so we're located in Stockton, Sacramento, and San Francisco, and our graduate programs are located at all 3 of those campuses. We have a total of 34 graduate programs, and actually of those 34, 13 have launched since 2015. So we've been in a little bit of a rapid growth mode with graduate programs here at University of the Pacific. So on the slide here, you will see all of our CASs. And just a little about our implementation of GradCast. We were one of the first institutions to sign on and start utilizing GradCast. So then our very first admissions cycle was this past admission cycle, and we started using GradCast in summer of 2018. So our summer and fall application cycle were the first in GradCast. So slide, please. So University of the Pacific is a blended model institution. So we have, basically we have a central admissions operations team. And we also have centralized admission policies. So we have base policies that revolve around GPA, degree, transcript, and then we also have international standards. So then programs basically have to kind of adhere to those base admission policies. However, all of the graduate programs set their own program-specific admission requirements. Applications are audited and they're processed centrally in the graduate school. Admissions decisions are then made within the graduate program, and final decisions are both offered and processed within the graduate school. We also have a large population of first professional students. So we have about 1,600 law, pharmacy, and dental students. Those are completely those are completely separate. So they have their own admission operations and they don't fall under the graduate school policies or operations.
Thank you, Olivia. So I think you've all gotten a good sense of how even with these definitions that we put out there, that those blended models, as most of our group has talked about here, even within a blended model, there's a lot of variations. So what we wanted to do now was just have a discussion and kind of talk about some broader themes as they relate to centralized application services and some of the benefits that are associated with these. So Julie, I'm gonna ask you to start. Can you talk a little bit about how the centralized application services fit within your current admissions model?
Yeah, I'm going to take that one and maybe even address that second bullet at the same time. As I mentioned in my opening, we've had CASs on campus for over 10 years. However, we just onboarded GradCast over the past year and launched initially in August. So we are in our infant stages of actually using it. I can tell you that with GradCast, however, we can mirror the sequence that we desired to have all along. So I was really spoiled by significant involvement with the professional CASs, and I was used to an excellent user experience and individualized program materials to highlight the unique aspects of each program. I was used to one-stop shopping, if you will, where students could enter everything that was required in one place, be able to track the progress of both his or her own completion, as well as processing by the desired institutions. I was used to a student being able to see if Dr. Smith had indeed submitted that letter of recommendation or not. So when I entered this position as a dean, I have to tell you, I was shocked. I did not have that kind of application for the graduate school at Missouri State. It was text-based. Some pieces came to us, others were mailed to the programs. The process was cumbersome. The grad college checked everyone's GPA and, if necessary, a standardized test score without even knowing if the department would be interested in accepting. And it was even more cumbersome when an international student was involved. Now, with GradCast, our programs have immediate access to their applicant materials, and they can tailor their communication plans accordingly. We can oversee and support as necessary. International services can get involved when they are needed. And certainly immigration needs don't necessarily have to be a milestone for any student prior to acceptance. In other words, I think it's really streamlined our process. It's allowed us to have a lot of good conversations with graduate program directors about best practices. And I feel that the system is not only more efficient, but really tighter and more in control. I feel like I would be able to defend it to any accreditor who had questions now because of the new system.
Thank you, Julie. Olivia, what are your thoughts on that? I know both of those two questions kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a blended model as well, right? And so we have to centrally work very, very closely with the graduate programs on getting all of those application materials in. And prior to, we had several CASs, right? But then we also had a different application system. So our team centrally had to kind of process several different workflows. We had this CAS workflow, and then we had this non-CAS workflow. So I'm kind of answering many of these questions, but this really allowed us, when we moved to GradCAS, it allowed us to just have one central system that we used and one central workflow that our team understood. But in terms of how does CAS fit within our current model, because we're blended, because we have to work so closely with the programs, there's a lot of great tools in WebAdmit that help in the application review process. So for example, it gives you the ability to build out custom fields for communication between program and graduate admission. So we built out a custom field that kind of basically says if there's any missing document notes, if there are any anything that, if the program needs a final transcript, we've built in a custom field for that. Basically, it just gives us the ability to document certain aspects of where the applicant is in that process so that the programs can see it and so that we can see it. There's a lot of great things that you can do in terms of local status customization. So basically you can build an admissions workflow using local statuses, and then the program is very aware of where that applicant is in the process. So they can see if the applicant is still working on completing their application. There's a bucket that says, these are the applicants that are awaiting program review. And then they can go into their different local status buckets and have a very clear picture of what these students are in that bucket. And there are all sorts of great things that we could do in terms of pre-structured applicant reviews. So there's just a lot of customization. We can customize based on program, different assignments. We can customize we can also customize the application itself. So for us, there's one tool that we're using, and we have the ability to make it very, very custom based on that program. So that's kind of how it fits within our current model. And really, what's changed since we implemented CAS is really that we now have one central system that we're using rather than multiple systems.
Thanks, Olivia. But I wanted to follow up on something that Dr. Masterson said a few minutes ago that I think that I found really interesting. You were talking about how you could justify this process to any accrediting agency, and both Dr. Melton and Olivia as well, if you have any thoughts on this. What that made me think of was that there are so many other campus constituencies that benefit or that need to be part of this admissions process, whether it's your self-study or accrediting office, whether it's institutional research, whether it's registrar. And just, Julie, throwing that back to you for a second, did any of those other campus constituencies come into play as you were going through and implementing the centralized application services on your campus?
It's a great question. I'll use this as a plug for a session that my colleagues from MSU and I are doing at MAGS this year. And the whole focus of that is we use this onboarding process as a chance to effect change and facilitate best practices. So you'll hear, if you're able, if you're in the Midwest area to come to that session, we met with every program director and sometimes faculty at least twice. And it certainly helped us with configuration, but it gave us so many wonderful opportunities to discuss best practices and to ensure that their standards, the procedures they were using, were indeed in compliance with university policy and our accreditor expectations.
Great, thank you. So,
can I piggyback off of that in terms of, I think there's also a lot of transparency within the WebAdmit tool. And so you can see that there's the ability to track basically every movement and every single time, whether the program or whether central admission has made a move on that application. So.
Some point. Dr. Melton, can you talk a little bit about why you made the decision to choose GradCast as the admissions process on your campus?
Yes. And again, this is Robbie Melton from Tennessee State University, an HBCU unit in the heart of Nashville metropolitan area. I would like everyone to just sit back and think about a situation where you are called in to reorganize within a month the whole admission process. Take a deep breath and think, where would you start? Where will you go? We started with a strategic plan and we searched out for a solution for our admission process. As you know, the way you start out usually sends a message to the applicant that either they're going to have a great experience or they're going to have some challenges. With that in mind, we conducted a needs assessment with all stakeholders, and we ranked them in the following order. Number one, transparency. All of our stakeholders, the graduate staff, faculty, and students, looking for a solution that will enable everyone to monitor and track the admission process. Number two, timely. Our goal now is to move into a solution whereby the applicant can receive a timely admission decision. Using GradCast and the other casts, we're now able to interact at any point of the admission process, as well as, here we go everyone, reduce the admission decision time by 60%. That is our goal. Also, data collection. This is why we have a blended model. We wanted to pull data from all of the casts at the same time using our local statuses, and something that just happened to us yesterday, we had a cybersecurity audit. And of course, being new, they selected Robbie Melton in the graduate school and said, can you share with us how you are able to use GradCast and what security are you implementing? I would like all of you to know that I was able to share with the help of the staff how GradCast secured the data. And here is the part where I got triple stars for being excellent. Because you have work groups and you're able to determine who will go in those various work groups, meaning that you determine the level of security. If you're only a viewer, you don't need to go down to level 5 in terms of looking at the configuration panel. So we were all set up. I was able to take them all in, and they were actually monitoring and auditing the various levels and came back, and that was one of the highlight of our audit. And just to summarize again, transparency, we went from losing forms to now documenting and tracing and tracking all forms. And then I must say, as a new person coming in and having to hit the ground running and setting this up, I'm still here to say to all of you, 4 months into this, I am still a happy camper.
And I can attest to all of, at least a bit of that work, having watched Dr. Melton and her team at work at TSU going through this entire process. So it's been quite an endeavor for them, and they've done a fantastic job. So Dr. Melton talked a little bit about having a strategic plan that was enabling her to be able to go through this process and successfully implement these CASs on campus. Olivia, can you talk to us a little bit about how using the centralized application services have helped you realize the strategic goals that you have set for the University of the Pacific?
Yeah, so University of the Pacific several years ago went through and completed a strategic enrollment plan. In that strategic enrollment plan, all of the growth was in graduate programs. And specifically, our Pacific 2020 strategic plan has a lot of focus on growing health programs at the graduate level. So how does this tie into CAS? Well, we're really, CAS, there are quite a few CASs that we utilize that really help us in planning out our program, setting up our programs, and really providing a level of visibility to our new programs. So I think I mentioned in the beginning, we've launched 13 new programs since 2015. For example, our physician assistant program, when we implemented CASPA, we right away had visibility into our target audience, understood and knew that we were there and that we had a program. And so it really helped us launch our programs from the very beginning. And so that's kind of how it's helped us with our growth in graduate programs here at Pacific.
Excellent. Julie, Robbie, do either of you have anything to add about strategic goals related to?
Yes. This is Robbie again, Tennessee State University. One thing I wanted to point out in terms of our strategic goals, again, getting a system that would help in terms of transparency, data collection, etc. I would just like for the audience to know that we had to transition into GradCast. In other words, this fall, we were running two systems, our old banner system and the new GradCast system. I would just want to emphasize the need for mentoring and having experienced people aboard to help you with that transition. So as you in one system and move into another, you need a team to help you in setting up the crosswalks and ending one system and starting the other. And I'm just here to share with you all that without the support, guidance of the GradCast staff, we would not, life would not be good. They helped us in looking at both systems, deciding on the features, the integration. So just know it's not just utilizing the online application. You must look at processes and the transition.
I think that's a really good point to keep in mind. And I think your discussion too about kind of widening your net and taking the benefit of experience of others is important as well, which I think is a good segue into the next question. When we talk about centralized application services, we talk about them in terms of community. For the folks on the call or those of you who are listening in who might have one of the national CASs, PT CAS, Farm CAS, I think you understand the concept very well of being in a CAS community, the benefit of being in a group with certain foundational commonalities associated with it. So Julie, can you speak a little bit to what you consider to be the main benefits of being part of any one of these CAS communities?
Yeah, I think a good way to think about this issue is on two levels. Your local CAS community at the university level, and then the national CAS community. On the local level, it has been so helpful on my campus. My users of the professional CASs have been great as we have implemented GradCAS. They've been a source of coaching and support for all of the new grad program directors who are trying to learn about Web and MIT. Similarly, because my entire campus is now going with GradCAS, the professional CAS users have been able to finally have their information integrated within our student information system. So it was a real benefit to everybody. As a professional CAS, a heavy professional CAS user in the past, I think sometimes we felt a little bit isolated because we weren't part of the mainstream admission system, but now because everybody's more or less using what looks to be like the same software, they can relate. On the national level, there are tremendous benefits about being in the CAS community. For one thing, when one CAS requests an enhancement, because that's part of the deal, the advisory committees get to meet once a year and request that Liaison would make a change to benefit their processing. All of us, all of the rest of the CASs benefit. So I get to take advantage of the wisdom coming from the Dental CAS Advisory Committee, for example. And then Liaison sponsors summits for the CAS, main CAS users, either the advisory committee leaders or the association reps. And I have probably learned more about admissions in those summits than I have anywhere else. In fact, I have to tell you that it was participation in those summits that convinced me that maybe applying to be dean of the graduate school would actually be a fit for me. I don't know that I would have thought that prior to being involved with this national group of people who were so professional and so empirical, so data-based in their approaches to admissions and the strategies that they used.
Thank you, Julie. And I think that from the same perspective, there's a lot of energy and synergy that comes from the engagement with all of the individuals from disparate colleges and universities, all different sizes, all different shapes with different processes. And when they all come together, this helps inspire what we do here as well, being able to craft these platforms that are going to allow you all to, meet your strategic goals, address your mission, make life easier for you, make the experience be a good one for your students. So we're very happy to hear that. So Robbie, I wanted to ask you, if you had a crystal ball, where do you see your admissions model being in 5 or 10 years? Do you see it continuing to be this hybrid model? Do you see it moving more to a centralized or decentralized? Or is there potentially a new model that we're not even talking about yet that Tennessee State might see itself in?
Within the next 5 years, I would like to continue with the blended model. It empowers the departments to be active participants as well as accountable for the admission decisions that they move forward. In 5 years, I would like the graduate school to take more of a quality control review. In other words, I would like the departments to send forth their recommendation, and the graduate school then have quality standards. And that's a byproduct of being a part of this community, because we now get to hear discuss, and meet with all of you regarding your best practices and quality standards. So in 5 years, I would like to see every program now moving into their professional national cast because it enriches the content and the interaction. In 10 years, everyone, I will be retired.
Excellent. And that's probably a very good note to end this part of the group discussion on. We definitely want to make sure that we have opportunities for everyone to ask some questions, but just a couple of items to wrap up with. We hope that at this point, or after you all ask some questions, that the learning objectives have been achieved for today, that each of these items that we discussed at the start of the webinar, that you're able to take away some from all of that. The other thing that we wanted to take note of as well is that there is an upcoming annual meeting of the Council of Graduate Schools in Washington, D.C. in December. That takes place from December 5th through 8th. And at that meeting, Dr. Masterson, who's on our panel right now, will be joined by Robert Ruiz, one of my colleagues from Liaison, along with Larry Bowles, who is a professor at the University of Pacific, one of the programs at Olivia's school. And they are going to be doing a presentation there about using data to support the life cycle of graduate student success. I would highly encourage your participation at this. The three of them present very well together, and it expects to be a very thoughtful and thought-provoking presentation. So we hope that you will be able to attend that. What I would like to do now is to turn this back over to Maureen so that she can lead a question and answer session. We want to thank you all for joining today. So please, our panelists are ready to take your questions. And I will turn this back over to Maureen.
Great, thank you. Thanks to all of you for your comments and your attention. We got a lot of questions from participants on the webinar, so I'm going to start right away asking some of their questions because I want to make sure we have as much time to address those as possible. So the first question that came in was how Liaison deals with universities that would like to maintain multiple application systems. So is it possible for a university to maintain their own application system alongside GradCast, or is that not something that's supported at this point?
So this is Karen Jacobs. So this is something that, as part of the process, when you would adopt GradCast, it would be replacing your current system. And it's a really good question. And it's one that gets asked often. And I think that, you know, having been a former user of CAST services myself when I was at Thomas Jefferson University, I do understand where that question comes from. But also having been a former user, the reason that I would say that is not a best practice either is that you would be managing things in multiple systems. It's confusing to the students. There's two places for them to be able to apply. It becomes challenging from an organizational standpoint in the admissions office or even with faculty on where this information is going to be held. So to eliminate that, when schools join GradCast, we help them transition into using GradCast as that single method of application. Because the redirects are on your website, you will not lose any applicants. Anyone that clicked apply now on your current website will be directed to your program in GradCast, so you would not lose any applicants. And I don't know if any of our panelists want to add to that or not.
No. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Karen. Another question, I think directly for Liaison, which is, with GradCast, are applicants able to attach all of their supporting documents straight to the application? So, for example, letters of recommendation or their resumes?
So there are very robust tools within GradCast that allow applicants to scan and upload different documents. And the schools get to decide the configuration of that. So one school might say, we would like students to scan and upload copies of unofficial transcripts and then have official transcripts sent by a different method. Or they might say that they would like students to scan and upload personal statements. All of that is accommodated within GradCast. GradCast also has the ability for students to request letters of recommendation. We have a very robust evaluator portal where we manage the letters of recommendation, so the students can make that request of letter writers. The letter writers do the letters, and they come right back into the system and attach to the student's record, so it's quite efficient.
And what about transcripts? Can GradCast verify transcripts, or how does that work?
Sure. Schools have the ability to either ask that students send official transcripts to GradCast, and in that case, our folks here at GradCast will verify the authenticity of those documents and digitize them and attach them to the student's record. The school could choose to not have the official transcripts go through GradCast and manage them on their own. But in my previous response, they could ask for unofficial ones to be attached by the students. So again, lots of flexibility there.
Thank you.
And can I add to that in that it's very customizable. So if one program wanted 3 letters of recommendation and all unofficial transcripts attached in their application, they could customize their specific application for that program. And if another program did not want that, they could customize that as well.
I'm going to direct this next question to Dr. Melton. What challenges did you face in implementing or using the CAS systems, and how did you deal with, resolve those challenges?
Thank you. This is Robbie Melton, and I will answer that in 2 levels. Those that we encountered and resolved, those that we encountered and we're still seeking solutions in terms of our processes on our end in terms of the university. Number 1, scope of work in terms of time, effort, and staffing to fully implement GradCast. We underestimated what it would take to fully implement GradCast. That was on our side. And again, we have a limited staff, not a full admission staff. So you're basically talking about 2, 3 bodies here. Now that we know, I would say to you all, take the time and do it right. We at first thought, well, maybe it'll be easier to do A when we really wanted B, only to have to go back and say, let's rethink this. So again, the major challenge is the first initial setup. And I'm sure my other colleagues who have been working with the CAS will share with you, year 2, 3, and 4, life is good. Another challenge was basically understanding the whole change in the organization, the major change of the graduate school being responsible for all documents, all decisions, and having to prepare the file, send it over to the faculty, and then beat them down for them to send them back. Now with GradCast, that whole process has changed where the responsibility lies with the department. And we are now viewed as more of a respectable quality reviewer of the process. And I'll let my other colleagues jump in.
I think that the notion of customizable program material section, so that is that one-stop shopping, is one of the primary benefits of GradCast. You know, my master's program in music composition wants something quite different from my program in experimental psychology, and they want something different from global studies. So everybody gets to have his or her own perfect choice. So that's great. I will say that we now know that this incredibly powerful tool that is indeed configurable does have ramifications of those choices, as Robbie's saying, for integration with your SIS. So the more that you can't anticipate everything until you get in the middle of it. We've learned that. As I said, I was a cash user for 10 years, and I've encountered a lot of things that I didn't expect, a lot of things that I did. So you have to just try and then see what happens. Our SIS team, our IT team has been really helpful. It has been a monumental task, but I'm very hopeful that once we get integration complete, that was one of the benefits for me in choosing GradCast, because I needed a system that didn't require a full-time technology person on my staff to be able to implement any sort of changes or retweaks in the configuration. So as much as you can, have these conversations initially and know that there will need to be tweaks along the way.
And hi, this is Robbie Melton again. I just would like to say, take the time and do it right. Again, we were on a very short time limit to implement. You're talking about 6 weeks. We were able to do it. But again, if you can take the time, work with the consultants, talk to others, and call us all up to say, what lessons did you learn? Life will be so sweet for you. But yes, you can implement in 6 weeks. I'm a living witness.
I agree with Robbie. We implemented in about 5 weeks, we look back and say we wish we would have had 6 months. So we implemented in 5 weeks, and we did have the ability to kind of manually download, but what took so long was implementing the API. That took us about 6 months to work with our CRM team to get the API connection right. So.
Yeah, I think this is Julie Masterson. It took us, we started implementing onboarding in October and didn't launch until August, but really focused, as my director of grad enrollment management says, hardcore onboarding and implementation was about 4 or 5 months. And we are still working, even after launching, we're still working on integration with our SIS. So we were lucky. We did have a long period of time to really think through how we were going to configure everything.
Thank you all. We've gotten a number of questions actually about integrating CAS systems with CRMs or databases. So thank you for kind of addressing those in your remarks. Specifically, we've had some questions about integration with Slate. Is there anyone on the panel who has experience with Slate specifically? No?
This is Erin. What I can say about that, I know the question was about Slate specifically, but this might be helpful just more broadly. The concept with the centralized application services from our perspective in terms of providing this as a platform is to provide the tools that the schools need to get the data and get the documents out of the centralized application service. So we provide something called an export manager to get the data out, and you get to customize what that data is going to be. We provide a PDF manager so you can extract the documents, like those official transcripts or letters of recommendation. We then, as Olivia just noted, we provide APIs, and those APIs are is kind of the technology that would allow for those exports to be run at a certain time period, so that a person would not have to go in and launch them. This API could speak to that export and say, run this export at 5 o'clock on Fridays, or every morning at 3 a.m. And then the fourth thing that we have is something called a data dictionary that basically allows for that mapping between what the data attributes are in the centralized application service, that allows you then to map that into your system. So those 4 tools are then used to pull the data out of the CAS. The schools then take it that last mile by then mapping that data into their own system. So they can map it into Slate, they can map it into Banner, they can map it into PeopleSoft. they can map it into Apply Yourself. Any place that's able to receive data, you'd be able to take the data out of the CAS system and put it in there.
Thank you. So for our final question, a lot of our participants have been asking about the amount of IT support that is needed to implement or facilitate a transition to a CAS system. I'll throw this one to Olivia first. So Olivia, how much IT support would you suggest is necessary to facilitate the CAS transition? Is there support available through Liaison, or is it internally supported?
So Liaison helped us kind of with some of the initial pieces of it, but it really did fall on us because we then had to map. Basically, we had to do the conversion, the data conversion, right? And then map it into our system. So I think I mentioned that it took us about 6 months in order to do the API. You could export the data at any time. So prior to setting up the API, we were able to export the data manually. We would manually download the data, and we worked with one of our IT members to use Axiom in order to import that data into Banner. However, we wanted to set up the API. We set up the API and had it route to our CRM, which is Salesforce. And so it took, we have an operations specialist on our team who does a variety of different things. He is not an IT specialist, however, but he is very tech savvy. He led our team and he worked with our CRM manager and one person in IT to do all the data connections. And they truly focused on that. It took them 6 months, but I would say of those 6 months, 3 of them were focused just on this job. And again, that's the connection of the API. That was not just the manual download of data and exporting of documents.
Thank you.
And this is Karen. I'd like to add too that Liaison is planning a webinar in early December, specifically about kind of coexisting with your CRM and SIS. We'll be mentioning the various other receivers of information like Slate, Banner, and so on in that webinar. So be on the lookout for that.
And this is Julie Masterson. I would add, I think the degree of technical support you need to integrate with your SIS depends to the extent to which you want to take advantage of the configurability and the versatility of this tool. The more complex and the more diverse your program questions and whole configuration are, the more challenging and the more time-consuming integration with the SIS team. For us, it was about 2 technical folks intensely for about 2.5 months because we took advantage of everything we could with this tool. But I will say that the technical folks at Liaison, my folks in computer services are on first name basis. They know when their kids were born. They are very, very close to them because they've been very responsive both ways to the needs. Liaison has been really receptive to our suggestions for changes, and our folks have been really receptive to Liaison's advice for how to get this done.
Great, thank you.
Hi,
sorry.
This is newbie Robbie. Right now in the smack of this, again, in terms of IT support, I'm pleased to share with you and implementing in 6 or 5 weeks. We had a 0.5 IT person on board with us. We are doing the crosswalk this semester, but if you are worried that you don't have enough IT support or it is IT intensive to implement, I'm here to give myself as a teachable moment. You can do this because, again, we're up and running and we are doing our crosswalk. And again, this is an entire university, so life is good.
Thank you all so very much for your sharing your experience and your insight today. And thanks to all of you who participated and answered questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will forward those on to Liaison for them to be able to follow up with you and provide you answers. And just to reiterate, the webinar recording and slides will be emailed to you, and it will also be posted on the CGS website. We aim to do that usually within a week of the webinar. So please feel free to share those widely with anyone who you think might be interested, and join us for the next CGS webinar, which will be on our 2017 graduate enrollment and degrees survey. So that will be a purely CGS-led webinar about a CGS project, and we'd love to see you there. Thank you all once again, and have a great day.